Welcome all in, everybody. Happy Sunday morning. Welcome all in for another episode of the Unofficial WCC Hoops podcast. That's Thomas. I'm Zach. And we got a lot to get into that we saw over the weekend. We got a lot to get into that we will see on today on Sunday as we have a full slate of games in the WCC across the league. And I think we have to kick this off and start this off with the scare in Spokane because Seattle U, they came to play. And I think we were curious about what Seattle team we would see if they would be able to give Gonzaga a run. Not only did they give Gonzaga a run, you could make the case that, I mean, if they don't go stone cold the last couple minutes, like we're looking at a Seattle U win at the Kennel.
Going away, no less. And I think you think about it, double-digit lead with 6 minutes to go. Like it's one you're going to want back, and especially it's one you want back in terms of the results and everything. But I think when we posed the question in our preview episode, it was, okay, this will tell us what Seattle U can meaningfully do in this league. And I think regardless of how it ended, even with the overtime loss, it's okay. Seattle U, you can come to play in this league. There's no transition from the WAC to the WCC. There's no ease-in period. This is, okay, we're here to come mean business and go make something happen. So I think for me, that was the encouraging part, the fact that they dictated the terms. And you talk about the way that it was basically Graham Mike, Braden Huff, and Tom Grant Foster versus the world. Like they shut the water off to everybody else for the bulk of the time. And I know Braden Smith had some very clutch free throws, but just in general, you look at the premise of week, I think Seattle U dictated the terms of the game, and if the offense doesn't bog down in the last 5 minutes, and I wasn't necessarily a fan of how the offense was being run and stuff like that, those last five in regulation, I mean, we're talking about a Seattle U win, even if it's in the single digits. So unfortunate for them in terms of the result, but I think very encouraging in terms of the process. Lots of things to like, especially on defense. Really just suffocated the bulk of the Zags. They like to have balance. They didn't really have any of that in that game. But I think the one thing that really, I guess, stands out to me at this point is how much do they have left in the tank? Because, it only gets easier. Surely it gets easier having to come back and do a tight turnaround and play St. Mary's, get on the plane no less, and fly all the way down here.
Right. And, think that last 5 minutes, yes, that went all Gonzaga's way. I was almost waiting for the Gonzaga run to happen at some point, and it's usually how do teams weather that storm. Because Seattle U did such a good job for the first 35 minutes of that game, answering every time Gonzaga seemed to be making a little bit of a run, a 4-0 run, 5-0 run. Seattle U had an answer almost every single time. And there's a lot of credit has to go to Chris Victor, his staff, and just the way they prepped for this game. Braden Maldonado had 17 in this one. There were moments toward the end of this one I was not a fan. I thought that they almost were too rushed to try to get a shot, that they didn't get the best shot that they possibly could on a couple of those late possessions. Because also, I think one thing that became a little bit more glaringly clear is that they really only have one late game ball handler, and that is Maldonado. That if you can put all the pressure on him, because Malik Arrington, as much of a distributor as he can be, he's not going to be the guy who's going to necessarily get to the basket in a clutch situation. He's not going to take many threes. So he's kind of limited in that front. So the fact that all of it was kind of on Maldonado late in that game really felt like one of the turning points of the Zags just kind of clued in on that and just really kind of beat that down. Because once that game got to overtime, and even in my head, I'm like, this game's over. The Zags are going to win this one. Like Seattle, you missed their shot to steal this one. But going into a back-to-back with Seattle, with Gonzaga and St. Mary's for Seattle U is a rough go, because going into Moraga now with the St. Mary's team, that is also they're 14-2 right now. They're 3-0 in league play, and they've been taking care of business. They beat up on Pepperdine. They beat up on Portland. They beat LMU in the opener last week. And the defense looks a little bit more there. I think the offense for St. Mary's doesn't look quite as crisp as we saw maybe earlier on in the year. But a matchup in this one, because like obviously like this is the big game of the night, of Seattle U St. Mary's at tonight, is I'm looking at Paulus Morauskas and just how well he has played over the course of the whole season, but also the last couple nights. He had another big night against Portland. Is how defensively is Seattle U going to handle him? Will Heimbrodt is going to be a big part of that, and he has been one of, if not the best defender in the WCC to this point. And that's going to be a fascinating matchup. And then also even, the point guards like Maldonado and Dent, these two going back and forth at each other is going to be really fun to watch as well. In that game, what's kind of something you're looking for? Because going back to back with Gonzaga St. Mary's is never an easy task. As many teams have known it, like Pepperdine had to do it just recently, just last week. And so what is kind of like the key to you in this one? Like, I mean, what does Seattle U have to do to be able to kind of steal one in Moraga after the near miss in Spokane?
I think it starts with not getting savaged on the boards. And I think it starts with the energy you bring into the UCU pavilion. It really starts with knowing how gritty you have to be against St. Mary's. I think that's where the buck starts for Seattle U, and knowing that you emptied a lot out of the tank in that manner against Gonzaga, which is why I posed that question of how much do the Redhawks have left in the tank. And I think realizing that Will Heimbrodt is a great defender, and we've seen in certain times, sometimes St. Mary's is some of their better offense has been a missed shot to get it out for Harry Wessels and Andrew McKeever. So if that does end up being the case, and I think of the Northern Iowa game where they end up drawing a lot of fouls just because of the position and the leverage that they had to their point. Okay, then what is Seattle U going to do to respond? Is it going to be more Brock Felder? Like, is Austin Maurer going to like stay on the floor? So at least for me, that's kind of just how I view that. And I think at least for me, the disparity between you mentioned Malik Arrington. I mean, he only took 3 shots against Gonzaga. He was basically taken out of the game. Conversely, Will Heimbrodt put up 19 shots and only shot 4-19 from the field. So does that balance kind of come intact on the offensive end of the floor? And then do they not get sieged on the glass by McKeever, Wessels, and the bunch and the rest of the Gales? Because I think they can do a reasonably good job on Mikey Lewis. I think they could do a solid job against Morauskas. I think they have good individual defenders, but you got to finish possessions with rebounds, and I think that might be a tough task.
I mean, this is all obviously the thing that St. Mary's has been most known for over the last few years is just their dominance on the boards. I am a little curious of how they're going to handle the McKeever and Wessels tandem, because that is one where I don't know if Seattle really has like the bodies to kind of match up with St. Mary's. As much as Dan Maurer, Heimbrodt are going to be able to, I think, do a decent job down there in the post. Like, this is a different size than Gonzaga. I mean, we've talked about of like both EK and Huff, like 6'9", 6'10", but you're looking at now 7'1", 7'3", dealing with St. Mary's. So there is a very different size disparity when it comes to what St. Mary's is going to be able to bring. And I mean, even looking at what this is going to look like. Hold on, I'm actually trying to pull up some of like the recent stats of what we've seen from on the rebounding from St. Mary's in the last couple of games. Now, it actually hasn't been as drastic as we're normally used to seeing. It's actually only +3 against Portland, +9 Pepperdine, +4 against LMU. So the WCC teams have done maybe a little bit better job of keeping St. Mary's off the glass as often as we're used to seeing. But this is Seattle U's first go at it. The LMUs, the Pepperdines, the Portlands know what St. Mary's is all about. These coaches know each other so well. So this is going to be Chris Victor's first chance to be able to coach against Randy Bennett and see how this is going to go. So yeah, you're right. Like, the boards are going to be key. I wonder how much. The one thing I will say about how much they have left in the tank is that Seattle U does typically play a slower pace, and that is what they got Gonzaga to play, I feel, for a lot of the game against them the other night. And because of that slower pace, that might actually play well into going into St. Mary's, because that's exactly what Seattle U wants to do. Like, they would rather play at that slower pace and slow it down. Now, as far as an example of, because I feel like a lot of teams, when they do have this back-to-back, yes, a lot of the energy is spent against Gonzaga, but also because teams tend to play Gonzaga's pace. And that is another key to it of like, hey, you're burning up all that energy with more possessions, running up and down the floor and trying to keep up with Gonzaga, playing Gonzaga's way. Yeah, that is not going to, that is when you get dragged into the mud by St. Mary's on night 2. But with a team that didn't have to play that way all night long in Seattle, you come in the Moraga to play St. Mary's, I think it's going to be a little bit of a, it'll be a closer matchup, I think, than most teams usually get on night 2 in this really ridiculously hard back-to-back. But it also feels like a game like this is first to 60, 65 is going to win this game, because I don't think this is going to be high scoring at all. I think this is going to be one of those lower scoring matchups that it's going to be defense first. I mean, Seattle U almost won that game and they shot 37% from the field. So let's be clear. It's like Seattle U did a lot of good things, even though they didn't shoot it particularly well against Gonzaga. So going into St. Mary's is obviously the game of the night. This is going to be a tough one, but I'm excited to kind of see what we get out of these two.
Yeah, I think it's I don't even know if I'd equate it to styles make fights, but I think it's definitely something where it's like who imposes their will and embraces their identity a lot more than the other. And I don't think you can really make a clear conclusion as to who will do that. I think it could be more circumstantial. Like, I know I keep leaning on the argument of Seattle's energy and what they have left, but in the same vein, I think what Seattle, I mean, they just suffocated Washington State. They played good defense, but didn't win against USF. So I think, at least for me, it's okay, who kind of can set the tone in terms of identity? I think those first 5 minutes would be big, because lots of teams, when you get down double digits against St. Mary's, pretty much no matter what point in the game, it's just, I don't know if foregone conclusion is the right word, but it's, you are digging up a long mountain and you got a long climb ahead of you. So at least for me, it's who wins those first 5 minutes, who imprints their identity. And I think those are the two keys going forward before you even get into like the shot making and the rest of the bunch.
Yeah. And this is, so Seattle U and St. Mary's, and the matinee start 5:00 tonight in Moraga at UCU Pavilion. Now Gonzaga's matchup tonight, they have LMU, and we've seen some good things out of LMU, some not good things out of LMU. They're currently midway through their Eastern Washington road trip. They did lose that game close to Washington State the other night. Ace Glass with that runner off the window to give the Cougars the win. But LMU, like, the one thing I will say, even though they lost that game, it's that I do like the fact that we're seeing the offense be more consistent with the Lions. And I think that's a really important component for that team, especially when you're heading on the road going to Gonzaga against a Gonzaga team that, well, I mean, is having almost their normal annual lull at the beginning of January. It always seems like the Zags kind of sleepwalk in the conference play. This is the window where we saw them lose to Santa Clara last year, where they lost to Oregon State last year. And they got pushed to the limit by San Diego. They got pushed to the limit by Seattle U at home. LMU, probably a team that on paper we looked at as being maybe the one that was going to be a little bit more of a factor early on, and they've continued to, I think, kind of live up to that to this point. This is one where I feel like the Zags have to kind of get right at some point, because there's no way. And like I was thinking, even as they went into halftime against Seattle U, of like the amount of yelling that Mark Few was probably getting into their ears about the way they played, that the fact that the defense wasn't as great, that the offense really wasn't flowing as well as they normally like it to. You'd imagine that something's got to change against LMU, but at the same time, it's like LMU, like, and Stan Johnson has won in that building. Let's keep in mind, like, he knows what it takes to win at the Kennel. And this is an LMU squad. Like, Rodney Brown played, he's healthy. You got Jan Vide with one of his best nights, 28 points against Washington State. I don't know if they can go up there and steal one, but it feels like at a certain point the Zags are going to get caught in one of these nights where they are just not playing well.
Yeah, I think for me it starts with their mental demeanor and like their mental, I guess, focus, so to speak. And I think it even this extends all the way back to the USD game. Remy K gets a technical foul, has to come off the bench in the Seattle U game, and I think the the situation that I kind of look at is directly compared to last year when they lost at Oregon State. And okay, the assumption I had was okay, they're going to be a pissed off team. They're going to face Santa Clara and they're going to do their best to go out and go make something happen. And instead, they give up. Santa Clara has the program record in threes. They score over 100 points, and then they beat Gonzaga and Spokane for the first time in almost 20 years. So for me, it's kind of a similar thing right now. Like I'm expecting a mad Gonzaga team that has played bad down the stretch at USD, that didn't play that well against Seattle U, and then eventually found a way to win. Now against an LMU team, it's like, okay, like let's get ourselves course corrected here. But if they don't get themselves course corrected, then I feel like I'm on a train that's heading to the same station as last year. It's like, okay, well, are they going to get a pissed off Gonzaga team facing Santa Clara up in the kennel, or Broncos going to surprise them again? So for me, it's about I think, mental fortitude and really process more than anything, because at a certain point, there are some games where people are going to sleepwalk. I mean, it just happens. But I think when you notice that this has kind of been a somewhat of a consistent feature over the last few years, you kind of really want to get that course corrected as quick as possible. Gonzaga, I expect them to be playing well down the stretch of the regular season and into the conference tournament. But as of right now, it's not really not close to what they've been showing for the better part of the first 2 months. And I think they know that. I think they know they have to be better. I think the fans know that they have to be better. Coaches know that. Players know that. So at least for me, it's about mentally what type of focus do they come in with more than anything.
Yeah, I mean, I was just kind of going through LMU's line from the Washington State game, because I mean, the one thing that they're going to have to do is they're going to have to shoot it well. And Rodney Brown being back, like he had 12 points, he was 2 for 6 from the field. MJ Amy had 8 points. He only took 5 shots in this one. Now, I think that was largely because Jan Vide was just on a heater, so like a lot of those shots that would have been MJ Amy went over there. But it feels like it's one of those nights, kind of again, when LMU did beat Gonzaga a few years back at the Kennel, that was Cam Shelton just going absolutely bonkers in that building. And that's what they will need. I think they need one of their guys to just go absolutely bonkers. It needs to be a Rodney Brown, an MJ Amy, maybe a Jalen Shelley has like the night of his young career. That's, I think you have to have some of that. Again, I wonder about the strategies about how you handle EK and Huff, because to an extent it's like, that they're going to get theirs. You can try to limit them as best you can, but they're how skilled they are, they're almost inevitable that they're going to get their numbers. Seattle U appeared to take the strategy of let them get theirs and stop everybody else, which largely was working in that game. And maybe a couple other teams will start to actually do the same thing of don't have the extra help on them. Don't actually come to do that, because what really damages you is when they get open shooters and they are able to start draining threes and really spread the floor. Yes, the single coverage is dangerous against both Huff and EK, and that's almost an automatic bucket when you do that. But if it's between that and letting Adam Miller getting going, letting that happen, or Mario Saint-Superi get going, or Braden Smith get going, that's when Gonzaga is really dangerous, is when everybody else on the floor starts to get into a rhythm. And if they can be kept out of the rhythm for longer and longer into the game, you might have more of a shot to knock off the Zags, especially if you're a team like LMU who doesn't have a ton of size. I don't think they're going to bother Huff or EK. So maybe the plan here is slow everyone else down. Slow Tyon Grant Foster down if possible. Like that might be the one of, like, if I'm keen on one of the Zags players, I need to make sure that he's in check, that I have a body on him at all times. That's the guy I have to make sure I'm keeping an eye on throughout the entire game.
Yeah, no, I like that pick mainly because what Tom Grant Foster can do more than anything is getting downhill can open up so many other things. So if you draw that extra defender, oh shoot, who's open? Graham EK or Braden Huff? That's a problem. he can swing it around the dial and see if Adam Miller's open on the wing for a three or something like that. So I think so many things can fundamentally change if Talon Grant Foster can turn the corner and get downhill. So I like the fact that you think marking him can be a good idea. I'm also subscribed to the same thinking that someone's just gonna have to go off and like absurdly go off like 30 plus off for LMU to get the win up in the kennel. And for me, I look at MJ Amy all the time because he's kind of like a bottled up kind of like microwave, and we've seen it happen where he can go in like 7-8-0 runs himself. So I think LMU is going to need multiple of that. I think Jan Vita is going to need to play a smart game. I think he can have two or less turnovers. I think that would be something that in pro LMU along that front. If he has more than that, then I'd be concerned. Rodney Brown's got to knock down a few threes, and Rick Assans is not going to have to be in foul trouble. I think if you just get some contests up while acknowledging that EK and Huff will do their thing because they're damn good players and they're some among the best on the West Coast and definitely in the country if you want to get into that discussion. Rick Assans has to go up good contests and not give up cheap fouls, because I think that's something that EK and Huff can thrive on. If you think you can just get in there and body them, it's not always going to be that easy. I think it has to be a special case, and I look at Michigan being that special case. You can't just sit there and think, yep, we're going to be physical, we're going to drive them out, where they're not going to have the leverage against us. Yeah, that's easier said than done. So at least for me, it's Rick Assans. How can he stay on the floor without fouling, while acknowledging that Stan's been starting to run things a little bit differently at the center position this year.
As far as taking care of the basketball, LMU has had 10 or fewer turnovers in 4 of their last 5 games. That includes actually only 6 against St. Mary's. So they've done a very good job taking care of the basketball over the last few weeks. I'm just kind of start to look at the rest of the slate coming up. Now, one I know that we kind of started to look at is what's happening with San Francisco. This has been one that we've kind of been focused on for off and on, because the Dons have been very up and down all season long. Right now they're sitting at 2-1, and they are one of only 5 teams in the league. So they are top half right now in the conference, getting the win against San Diego the other night, even though probably wasn't as great of a performance as they would have liked it to have been against the Toreros. But this is, as you put in our notes, it's the Mosich Bowl, because they are taking on the Portland Pilots, they're still looking for their first win in conference. And they've had some opportunities to get some wins early on. They could have beaten Washington State. They were in it for a while with Santa Clara. It feels like at some point Portland's going to get over on somebody. And oddly enough, the USF is probably a team they've played better than most over the last few years.
Yeah, and I know I dubbed it the Mosich Bowl, and it still is. Don't get me wrong. In factual reality, that's what it is. But he's had kind of a rough go at times this year, I think, and it goes back to the premise that I ran with, that USF is they have roles that aren't fitting people. So he's being asked to be more on the ball when he should be away from the ball, catch and shoot game more than anything, come around screens and lift up those threes. So I think that's part of the reason why things have been disjointed at times, and that's kind of what I look at as why some people may have the ire of Mosich over if you're a Dons fan. But going forward into this game, and I think more than anything, it's who has that consistent identity on offense. Portland, obviously, they got taken out of it by St. Mary's. They did a great job of it against Santa Clara. USF, we don't know what we're going to get on any given game. Is it going to be North Alabama USF? Is it going to be Mississippi State USF? Is it going to be Seattle USF? Is it going to be Oregon State USF? So there's been a lot more Jekyll and Hyde than this with this team this year. And Legend Smiley had a good game against USD, so that's great. But what's going to happen when the front court literally puts up a donut against the Toreros? Now you face a Portland team that they're scrappy. Joel Foxwell, you let him get downhill, that's a problem. I think in the Memphis game, USF let Memphis get downhill at will, draw the fouls, eventually get the kick-out game going. So it's what can you do to try and cut off the water of Joel Foxwell? And I think Portland, they're a pesky team. This is one where USF, they should be looking over their shoulder, because Portland can definitely sneak up on you and get one. So for the Dons, I think it's more than anything, it's about, can you find a way to get everyone involved consistently? And that's kind of been the age-old question, especially on offense. Defensively, we know that what their struggles are on the interior. So we'll see if Jermaine Balasager-Webb and Cam Williams can potentially just get up there and do something with their athleticism.
Yeah, you mentioned Joel Foxwell in that that you have to kind of contain him, because he's coming off actually probably his one of his worst games of the year against St. Mary's. And that's kind of typical. A lot of guys end up with their worst game of the year being St. Mary's. But look, that line, like he did still have 9 points, but 4 for 12 from the field, 1 for 5 from 3. A very uncharacteristic night from Foxwell. So you'd expect that he's going to be a bit better in this game against USF, and he and Ryan Beasley, that's going to be, I think, a fun matchup to watch. The front court numbers, like that is the one thing that you brought it up. Like that is startling that you don't get a single point from David Fuchs or Guillermo Diaz-Graham the other night. Abosi with only 5. Gigi Barria with 2 coming off the bench. Like this was not it was a win, but it was not an easy one, a fun one. USF ended up shooting 41% for the game, but they had to shoot 51% in the second half to really pull away from San Diego. And they had a good second half, but like that was neck and neck in that first half. Adrian McIntyre started to get off, like his first, I feel like complete game, like 16 and 10 for him for San Diego. And this is where it became just harder and harder to look at what was happening with USF and think that I don't know what I'm going to get on a night in, night out basis, because we have seen some of the best, we've seen some of the worst from USF at this point. And we're just going to they need to get some things right, because otherwise, you're right. Portland's a dangerous squad. Like I could see them stealing. You brought up the Mussage Bowl. This is not the only football here, because James O'Donnell, the former Don, is now with the Pilots. So we did have that essential trade in the offseason of O'Donnell for Mussage happen. So this is going to be interesting, because the front court, I think, is the weak spot right now for USF, and then Portland can take advantage of that again. Like they were only -3 on the boards against St. Mary's. If they can kind of have that same level of effort and go into USF, like they're going to stand a very good chance of getting out of the hilltop with a win.
Yeah, and I think Portland has to use their pace and athleticism to their advantage, and I think they do that. You've put yourself in a good enough position to make something happen. And I think I don't know what the status is of Timo George going forward, obviously, because he dislocated his shoulder against Santa Clara. So I think obviously he's not. You can't just assume that you're going to be rocking with him the whole time, so to speak. So that's obviously that's a man down. So for Portland, it's really how can they find a way to just run smooth offense more than anything. And I think you look at USF. When you beat USD, you mentioned the struggle bus, and I think this is a good segue to any, because Tyler Johnson didn't play for the Toreros, and will Tyler Johnson play when the T-Rose go down to play Santa Clara this afternoon? So, and Santa Clara, it's a team that flirted very close to the sun and even got burned sometimes against San Diego. So Herb Sendek's team's got to be really on it. But last game, Elijah Mahi continues to do his thing. Christian Hammond provided some good spots. And I think the one thing, at least over the course of the last few, is while acknowledging that Oregon State maybe wasn't the best evidence for this point, Buki Aboye is staying on the floor, and when he stays on the floor, good things tend to happen. When Jake Ensminger is healthy and available, good things tend to happen. That's a winning basketball player. Christian Hammond doing his thing. So Santa Clara, as easy as it is to want to look ahead and see that the kennel's around the corner and having everything you want right in front of you, you got to get through today. And this is exactly the type of spot that has tripped them up in the past. So really intrigued to see how they take care of business mentally more than anything against San Diego.
Yeah, it is one of those interesting matches. Again, it feels like Santa Clara's had a couple of those games recently. Think about the game against I'm not blanking against Pepperdine. It kind of was a little shaky at the very beginning, and then they finally kind of got it going. You'd think about the matchup that they had also following up against I'm blanking on the second game now. It's like they beat Oregon State. Portland. Portland. Just talking about them. Those two games were a little shakier, but I think that the fact that they still were able to get out of those games and separate themselves a bit was a good sign. And because those games a year ago might have been ones that they would have lost. And maybe the game against Loyola was kind of like a bigger wake-up call that you have to be better late in games in especially against teams that you're supposed to beat. Again, that's, I think, the key, always been the key for Santa Clara. Is like, we know that they can, the ceiling is always high because we've seen them beat the best of the teams on their schedule. But there's always that lull, always the pit, the speed bump, the pothole that they run into. So far, they have been able to avoid it through the last two games, Portland and Pepperdine. But now they're going up against San Diego team who's probably feeling a little bit better about themselves because of the game against Gonzaga last week. And if they can, I think it's really the key is early on. It's do not let San Diego get going early. You have to be able to limit them, make life difficult early in this contest to take them out the game, because the longer you let San Diego hang around, the more confidence they will gain and the tougher this is going to be to get a win. Because we even saw it against UC San Diego with the Toreros. It's like they were allowed to hang around, and then they had and then they literally had a shot at the end to win that game. And Tyler Johnson hit the bank that gave them the win. You cannot fall asleep against this team. Again, the Zags fell asleep against this team. They were up by 21 and ended up being a single point game by the end. Like, you cannot take your foot off the gas against San Diego. You cannot think that, oh, you have it in the bag even when you get up big against this team. So again, like, even think about this, like being up 21 against the Zags, coming back to single digits, like Santa Clara is not the Zags. So like being up 21 doesn't, like, that could be erased completely by a San Diego team if you let them do it. So make it, especially on the guard front, because like they don't have a ton up front that's going to really bother you. The key is going to be what you do on the guard positions, making it difficult for Tyler Johnson, making it difficult for Adrian McIntyre. You have to make it difficult on the San Diego guards to really give yourself a chance in this game. Juanzi Gorosito in this one, like, again, veteran guard, like, you have to keep an eye on him because he's crafty. He's going to find his spots. And I mean, that feels like a Brenton Napper, just go chase down Gorosito the entire night. And make sure that he's in check, make sure that he's not going crazy. And limiting them on a three-point line. That's also the other way that they tend to stay in games, is that they shoot the three well. They did not do it against USF. They were 4 for 22. But keeping their guards in check, making sure that they do not get going from the three-point line, is a way you can make sure that San Diego you're looking at them in the rear view mirror rather than trying to chase them down.
Yeah, and the one guy I kind of want to look at among the ones you mentioned, Juanse Gorosito, because he's got past experience in Portland. And at the Levy Center, I remember seeing him play, and they were just lighting the cords up to start the game and forced Santa Clara to kind of really take stock of what they were doing. And really around the 5-minute mark of the first half, from then onwards, then they finally started to play their brand of basketball against the Pilots. But when I think of what Juanse Gorosito can do, like, that's a guy who can get hot from three, like, very quickly. And I think the one thing that's really hurt Santa Clara this year is point of attack defense. Like, they've allowed a lot of blow-bys, and it's not just getting a free run down the lane, it's those kickouts. And then if Juanse Gorosito is wide open, I mean, I'm about ready to put 3 points on the scoreboard. So that's kind of how I look at it. Santa Clara has to keep the lid on, and this isn't just exclusive to USD. Like, this has to be better against St. Mary's. This has to be better against Gonzaga. Like, point of attack defense has to be so much better than it has been. And while Santa Clara is doing some other things very well, and I'll give them credit to that, like they're rebounding well, I think their shot making has gotten a little bit better, or in terms of decisions. I know they take a lot of threes. They don't make a ton of threes, which has kind of been a crusade that I've been on in terms of just pointing out more than anything. They still shoot 45% of their shots from three, while shooting about 32% from the floor as a team from beyond the arc. So that's kind of a tough deal to kind of stomach and go forward. So for me, it's point of attack defense and shot selection. Those are the keys for the Broncos. And they got players who can more than step up to the plate. I mean, I already mentioned some of them. I mean, you're not going to meet more of a Jake Ensminger defender than I am in this league. Christian Hammock continues to do his thing. Elijah Mahi. That's a trio that you really love to see. And if Brent Napper, the one thing that stands out, not necessarily in a good way, but the one thing you hope, if you're a Broncos fan, that'll turn around, is his 3-point shot. Shot 20% from three in the non-conference after shooting 43 from beyond the arc a season ago. So if that turns around even a little bit, then I think that changes the game for Santa Clara.
All right. Now going to transition here a little bit, because we talked about USF being a very Jekyll and Hyde team now, and we're going to go to a couple of teams that are very Jekyll and Hyde. It feels like all season long, and that is Oregon State and Washington State as they both meet each other at Beasley Coliseum today. We've seen the Washington State is looking a little bit more consistent since WCC play has begun. You can, like, you think about the 3 games that they have had, like they've won 2 of their games and they have a shot to win the 3rd against Seattle U at Climate Pledge Arena. Oregon State, it's either been decent or awful. That has been their WCC play to this point. They got steamrolled by both Santa Clara and Pacific, and then were able to etch out a win against USF up at Gill Coliseum. But, I mean, this matchup is obviously a future Pac-12 matchup, old Pac-12 matchup, however you want to, like, kind of talk about these two. But Oregon State and Washington State, this is going to be a little bit of kind of a, not necessarily clash of styles, but it feels like that this is a team that we have seen one that's battle tested in Washington State, and a team that has really not been battle tested at all, and that is Oregon State. Even though they do have the win at Arizona State, like, I feel like every time the Beavers have a opportunity to kind of like get some momentum, they fall flat on their face. For Washington State, it feels like they didn't weather the storm, but they are now on the other side of the storm, because their non-conference was really rough, and now they've come into WCC play. They look a little bit more confident. They look a little bit more put together, and it has taken some time. But Washington State feels like, to me, now a team that has more of it figured out than we thought a few weeks ago.
I think if you're Washington State, you should look at this and be salivating towards this opportunity, knowing that, okay, look, we didn't have the non-conference we wanted, but a 3-1 record to start WCC play through 2 weekends, no slouch whatsoever. You'd take that all day. And I think David Riley knows that. He mentioned that this is a team that has been growing. He's finding a way to just continue. They've taken their lumps. You mentioned battle tested. He's mentioned just as much. So I think when I look at what Ace Glass is doing, I think Reed Babers has had some good stretch run recently, and Okafor has also had some things that I'd like to see. Had, I believe, a double against Seattle U, and even though that was a loss, the Cougs they're turning the corner in a good way. Conversely, the Beavers are turning the corner in a bad way. Oh man, I don't know what to make of them, because the bottom has fallen out bad. Like Santa Clara, they got punched in the mouth. That game was over in 10 minutes. Pacific, I mean, they were up 15 at the half and then punch them again out of the break, and that game was over then. So, and it's back to the essential question: why can't Wayne Tinkle teams play on the road? I mean, that's a science and math equation that I can't break down in the moment, because I can only defer to Beavers fans who have seen it for a decade now of why Beavers teams can't just do anything on the road right now. So that was bad. That was really a rough watch, all things considered. And if I'm Oregon State, I don't necessarily know how that turns around against Washington State. I think the Cougars are a pretty good home court team, more or less, and Oregon State is not a good road team. So I like where the Cougs are at in terms of this game, and I think Ace Glass is going to have another good one.
Yeah, and I think for Oregon State, I think the confusion with me about this team is that there are teams that are balanced enough where, like, I don't know who it's going to be on a given night, and that's a good thing, because you have a lot of sources of, like, the offense might come from this night, or might have the good rebounding night from this person, or whatnot. Like, it seems like there's some teams have a lot of talent and it's balanced out. So that's where, like, the good, you never know who it's coming from. Oregon State is kind of the opposite version of, I don't know who it's coming from, because I don't necessarily trust any of them to get the job done at this point. And I mean, Josiah Lake has been the most consistent on this team, and that's a testament to just how hard he has worked and improved over the course of his college career. Again, he's a former walk-on, and he's done a lot of really good things, and it's become their go-to guy. But at the same time, no one has really come with him on the consistent basis. Isaiah C. has been better as of late. He's had some good games recently, but collectively, I just don't know who I can look to be like, yeah, this is who's going to really, like, help the Beavers get over on somebody. that's the part that is hard with that squad. With Washington State, at least again, like I know now. I know that I can rely on Ace Class. I know that Andy Okafor has become a more consistent, reliable source. I have had the good nights and some bad nights from Emmanuel Ugbo. I've had some. I know Richard Favors is going to be my sharpshooter. I kind of know what the roles are with Washington State at this point. I don't necessarily look at Oregon State in the same way. And you're right. It's like these two teams seem to have they both turned the corner, but in very different ways. Washington State turned the corner in a good way, Oregon State in a bad way. And yeah, this one is going like it was funny, like been doing some of the on Twitter of those who follow, like we've been doing some weekly picks for each of like some various matchups and whatnot. And I picked Washington State in this one. And one of the Washington State accounts even was like, really, you've watched us play basketball and you picked us? And I followed up, I was like, well, I've also seen Oregon State. And yeah, so that's why I picked you guys. And that's kind of where we are right now with this squad. And we're going to try to wrap it up here pretty quickly. And we'll get into the final matchup that we have yet to discuss, and that is Pacific and Pepperdine. And this one, I feel like with these two squads, Pepperdine, their first three games, they got the top three teams in the league. They ended up with Gonzaga, St. Mary's, and Santa Clara. And that was not going to end well. We kind of knew that going in. Now that they're kind of past those top three, maybe Pepperdine is at the end of the tunnel. And a matchup with Pacific is a bit of a sigh of relief that it's no longer the big three. But at the same time, this is a Pacific squad that played really well the other night against Oregon State, had a big night from Elias Ralph, and is a better team, but we've also seen them be inconsistent as well. They lost to San Diego last week. They are still trying to kind of put the pieces together themselves. Are we giving Pepperdine a chance to kind of like get over the hump here? Yes, they're still on the road. Yes, they have not looked good in their first three games, but at least it's no longer against the best teams in the league.
Well, we could say the Pepperdine Waves are battle tested. That's for sure. Like we don't got to worry about that. Pacific, I think just to dial back to Oregon State real quick, like they needed a get right game. Like those are two winnable games they had against USD and LMU. Didn't get either of them, and especially against USD, that was disappointing. They needed a get right game, and they threw the first punch and really sustained it against the Beavers. So good on Pacific for coming with the right sense of desperation. I think Pacific, I can see Pepperdine doing a lot. I can see them doing better. I don't think they're going to get the win today. I can see it being a single-digit loss. That's just kind of where I stand on it. I think there's some, if you can get Danilo Dozic going from beyond the arc, I think that's something you want to do, kind of get the little spray and pray inside out. I think that's where Pepperdine can get Pacific a little bit. And for the Tigers, I think you've kind of seen it still, some elements of the offense bogging down when Elias Ralph isn't going. So for me, I think Pepperdine can do better. I'm just not sure they have enough to get over the top.
Yeah, I agree. And the key about Elias Ralph, like that, I think has been the turning point for a lot of these games with Pacific. Teams who have been able to successfully slow down Elias Ralph have done well against the Tigers. If he doesn't get going, it really puts a damper on what they're able to do throughout the course of the game. I'm waiting for a big Aaron Clark night in WCC play, maybe getting it from Javon Cooley, kind of like waiting for one of those to pop off. Again, I don't think they've had the right matchup yet to be able to do that. They might here against Pacific on the road, but this is going to be I think it's not one you could just scoff at and like kind of write off. You have to kind of like be looking at what Pacific can do in this game to see which direction are they really going to go. Are they if they can get this game, handle their business? They're inching toward top half. If they cannot handle the Tigers and they drop to 1 and 3, I mean, maybe we are looking at a squad that is actually going to sit toward the bottom. Which is not necessarily where we thought we would see Pacific end up when we were thinking about this team at the beginning of the season. All right. Well, with that, Thomas, any final thoughts as we wrap it up here? We got full slate of games. Again, we got Seattle U at St. Mary's. We have Gonzaga hosting LMU. San Diego at Santa Clara, Portland at San Francisco, Pepperdine at Pacific, and Oregon State at Washington State. Any final thoughts on what we will see today?
I think it's really fork in the road, like put up or shut up time for a lot of teams. And like, it's crazy to say that 4 games into your conference slate, but I really do believe that. And I think that goes for a bulk of the teams. I'd be sitting here too long for me to explain every single one of them, but they know who they are. And at least for me, it's like, okay, like this, the first, as Rocco Miller so eloquently put a few weeks ago when we were doing broadcasting together, for a lot of these teams, it's the first day for the rest of their lives. So got to get it figured out, got to find a way, and by any means necessary, get that win.
All right. All right. With that, thanks for watching, everybody. Be sure to hit the subscribe button. Follow along on social media at Unofficial WCC Pod. That's Thomas. I'm Zach. Thanks for watching, everybody, and we will catch you later.